How old was I then? 11, 12, or maybe 13 years? Probably 13, because being in love too seriously happens later. But I can't be sure, especially in warm places where the heart matures early, if it's to blame for such feelings. I can't remember exactly when, but I can tell you how my first love began. I really liked going into my aunt's room when she was at church, doing her evening prayers. Her chest of drawers was well kept and fascinating to me. It was like a museum with rare and old things that had a special old smell, like sandalwood fans that she kept with her white linens. I found satin pin cushions, knitted mittens, saint pictures, sewing supplies, a blue velvet bag with bugle embroidery, and an amber and silver rosary. I used to look at them and put them back where they belonged. But one day, I found something extra special in the top drawer, tucked under some old lace collars. It was a shiny gold thing, and as I reached for it, I accidentally crumpled the lace. What I pulled out was a small gold-framed portrait. I was amazed as soon as I saw it. A beam of sunlight came through the window and shone on the beautiful image. It felt like the lady in the picture wanted to step out and come to life. She was the most beautiful person I had ever seen, except maybe in my dreams when I was younger. The woman in the portrait seemed to be in her 20s. She wasn't a young girl or a half-open flower bud, but a fully grown woman at the height of her beauty. Her face was oval, not too long, with full lips that were slightly open in a gentle smile. Her eyes had a seductive sideways glance, and a tiny dimple on her chin, like a little dent made by Cupid's playful finger. Her hairstyle was unusual but elegant. Her hair was tightly curled and piled on top of her head, revealing the softness of her young neck, where the dimple on her chin was mirrored more softly and delicately. As for the lady's outfit, I won't say whether our grandmothers were less modest than our wives today, or if the confessors back then were more understanding than the ones now. I think it's more likely the latter, because 70 years ago, women took pride in being very religious and wouldn't have gone against their confessors in such a serious matter. What's clear is that if a lady dressed like the one in the portrait were to appear today, it would cause a scandal. From her waist, which started at her armpits, upwards, she was only covered by delicate, see-through fabric that didn't really hide two snowy mountains, with a pearl necklace in between. She even had the boldness to show off two beautiful, rounded arms that were fit for a goddess, ending in well-shaped hands. Well, when I say hands, I'm not being entirely accurate, because you could only see one hand, and it was holding a fancy embroidered handkerchief. Even today, I'm surprised by how the sight of that small painting affected me. I was in awe, barely able to breathe, gazing at the portrait. I had seen pictures of beautiful women before, like in magazines, mythological drawings in our dining room, or in store windows. Sometimes a lovely face or a graceful figure would catch my early artistic eye. But the miniature I found in my aunt's drawer, besides being incredibly beautiful, felt like it was alive with a subtle, lifelike quality. It didn't seem like a painter's whim, it felt like a real person made of flesh and blood. The warm and rich colors made me think there was warm blood beneath that pearly skin. The lips were slightly open, showing perfectly white teeth, and to make it even more real, the frame had a border of natural chestnut-colored hair, wavy and silky, just like the person's actual hair. As I mentioned, it wasn't just a copy, it was like looking at a real person through a glass wall. I quickly grabbed it, breathed on it, and it felt like the warmth of the mysterious lady was transferred to my lips and flowed through my veins. Right at that moment, I heard footsteps in the hallway. It was my aunt returning from her prayers. I could hear her coughing and her slow, painful steps due to her gout. I had just enough time to put the miniature back in the drawer, close it, and act like I was casually looking out of the window. My aunt entered the room with some noise because the cold from the church made her chronic catarrh worse. When she saw me, her wrinkled eyes brightened, and she gave me a friendly pat with her withered hand. She asked if I had been rummaging in her drawers, like I usually did. Then, with a smile, she said, hold on, I have something for you, something you'll like." She took a paper bag out of her big pocket, and from the bag, she pulled out 3 or 4 gum candies stuck together in a lump, which made me feel queasy. My aunt's appearance didn't make me want to open my mouth and eat those sweets. The passing years, her missing teeth, her very dim eyes, the tiny mustache or bristles growing around her sunken mouth, which was 3 inches wide, her dull gray hair sticking up over her pale temples, and her flabby, purplish neck that looked like a turkey's wattle when it's in a good mood. In short, I didn't take the candies. Yuck! A strong feeling of not wanting to eat them and a sense of protest came over me, and I said firmly, I don't want them. You don't want them? What a surprise! You're usually as hungry as a cat, my aunt said. I'm not a little boy, I said, standing up straight and on my tiptoes. I don't like sweets. My aunt looked at me, part good-naturedly and part teasingly. Eventually, she couldn't help but burst into laughter, which made her look pretty strange and revealed the strange look of her jaws. She laughed so hard that her chin and nose almost met, hiding her lips and making her wrinkles and lines on her cheeks and eyelids more pronounced. At the same time, her head and body shook from laughing, and her cough started to interrupt her laughter. She couldn't control it, and she ended up accidentally spitting on my face while laughing. I felt embarrassed and disgusted, so I quickly left and went to my mother's room to wash my face with soap and water. Then, I started thinking about the lady in the portrait. From that day and hour, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Whenever my aunt left the house, I would sneak into her room, open the drawer, take out the miniature, and get lost in looking at it. I stared at it so much that I imagined her dreamy eyes, hidden behind her long eyelashes, were locked onto mine, and her white chest was rising and falling. I felt too shy to kiss the portrait, thinking she might not like it, so I only pressed it against my heart or held it to my cheek. Everything I did and thought revolved around the lady. I treated her with extraordinary politeness and carefulness. Before going into my aunt's room and opening the desired drawer, I would wash, comb my hair, and make myself look nice, just like you're supposed to before meeting someone you love. I often ran into other boys my age on the street who were proud of having a crush and would show me love letters, photos, and flowers. They'd ask me if I had a sweetheart to correspond with. I felt inexplicably bashful and could only respond with a mysterious and haughty smile. When they asked me about the beauty of their sweethearts, I'd shrug my shoulders and call their crushes ugly. One Sunday, I went to play at the house of some girl cousins who were quite pretty. The oldest was not even 15. We were having fun looking at a stereoscope when one of the younger girls, who was maybe 12 years old, secretly took my hand. She was blushing like a red-hot coal and whispered in my ear, "Take this." At the same time, she placed something soft and fresh in my hand, which I saw was a rosebud with its green leaves. The little girl ran away, smiling and casting a sideways glance at me. But I shouted in return, "Take this." And I threw the rosebud at her nose, which upset her and made her moody with me for the whole afternoon. She still hasn't forgiven me for it, even though she's married and has 3 children. The 2 or 3 hours my aunt spent at church every morning and evening weren't enough for me to admire the captivating portrait. So, I finally decided to keep the miniature in my pocket and spent the whole day avoiding people as if I had committed a crime. I believed that the portrait, even through the fabric of my pocket, could see everything I did. I took this to such an extreme that if I wanted to scratch an itch, pull up my sock, or do anything not in line with my pure love, I would first take out the miniature, put it somewhere safe, and then do what I needed to do. In fact, once I had stolen the portrait, there was no limit to my strange behavior. At night, I'd hide it under my pillow and sleep in a defensive posture. The portrait stayed against the wall, while I was on the outside. I'd wake up countless times, worried that someone might steal my treasure. Finally, I'd pull it from under the pillow and slip it between my nightshirt, leaving an imprint of the frame for the next day. The touch of the beloved miniature gave me delightful dreams. The lady from the portrait, not as a picture but in her real size and form, lively, graceful, friendly, and beautiful, would come to me and take me to her palace on a fast and flying train. She would gently make me sit at her feet, pass her beautifully shaped hand over my head, caress my forehead, my eyes, and my loose curls. I'd read to her from a big book or play the lute, and she would smile, thanking me for the pleasure my reading and music gave her. My brain overflowed with romantic memories, and sometimes I was a page, and other times a troubadour. With all these imaginative thoughts, the truth is, I started to visibly lose weight, which worried my parents and my aunt greatly. In this dangerous and critical age of growing up, everything is a cause for concern, my father, who read medical books, would say. He closely examined my dark eyelids, my dull eyes, my tight and pale lips, and above all, my complete lack of appetite. "Play, my boy, eat, my boy," he'd tell me, but I would reply sadly, "I don't feel like it." They started talking about finding distractions for me, offered to take me to the theater, and even stopped my studies. They gave me foaming fresh milk to drink and poured cold water over my head and back to strengthen my nerves. I noticed that my father, at the dinner table or in the mornings when I went to say good morning to him, would stare at me for a while and sometimes run his hand down my spine, feeling the vertebrae. I pretended to lower my eyes, determined to keep my secret even if it meant I would rather die. As soon as I was free from my family's loving attention, I found myself alone with the portrait of my lady. I finally decided to get closer to her by removing the cold glass that separated us. I was trembling with fear when I did it, but my love overcame the vague fear that profaning the portrait filled me with. With careful skill, I managed to take away the glass and expose the ivory plate. As I pressed my lips to the painting, I could smell the faint fragrance of the natural hair border. I imagined even more vividly that I was holding a living person in my trembling hands. A feeling of weakness overcame me, and I fainted on the sofa, still clutching the miniature. When I woke up, I saw my father, mother, and aunt all bending over me with worry on their faces. My father was checking my pulse, shaking his head, and saying, "His pulse is very weak, it's barely there." My aunt, with her bony fingers, tried to take the portrait from me, and I instinctively held onto it tighter. "But, dear boy, let go. You're smudging it," she cried. "I'm not scolding you, dear. I'll show it to you as often as you like, but don't damage it. Let go, you're hurting it." "Let him keep it," my mother implored. "The boy isn't well." "Of all the things to ask," the old maid said. "Let him have it. Who could paint another like this, or make me look as I did back then? Nowadays, no one paints miniatures anymore. It's a thing of the past. And I'm also a thing of the past, and I'm not what's shown there." I was horrified, and my fingers released their grip on the picture. I didn't know how to say it, but somehow I managed to utter, "The portrait is you? Do you not think I look as lovely now, my boy?" Bah! People look better at 23 than at, well, I can't even remember how old I am. I hung my head, and I nearly fainted once more. In any case, my father lifted me onto the bed and made me drink a few spoonfuls of port wine. I recovered quickly and never wanted to enter my aunt's room again.